a lot of meetings? Yep, there we go. Good. We are recording this session so that other people who can't make the other meetings can know what ideas you all have, what questions you have for us. What we had planned to do is go ahead and run through some of the materials and then get right to the areas of greatest interest for you who are participating. Does that sound like it'll work for you? And all right, well, we're gonna get going. And Lisa, Dominique, and Adriel, you are our three special guests. So if at any time you have a question, you want us to shift directions, please just let us know. So I'm gonna share a screen. Oops. Okay. Can everyone see?
Yep.
Okay, great. And Adriel, this is mostly based on the PowerPoint that we went through last week with just a couple of updates in case you can't see it. Great. Okay, so we just wanted to start by reminding, like, what was the big charge? What was the thing that the board most asked to achieve? And it is the attendance area and special programs assignments so that Harrison Park can convert to a middle school and the K-5 students can be relocated. And then also increasing enrollment at Lane Middle School. And to achieve that, there have been a number of options that have come forward. We are on the F series. So we've gone A, B, C, D, E, F, and there's actually 3 versions of F, and there were 2 versions of C and a couple versions of E. So there have been a lot of different ways of looking at this, and it takes a lot of ways, right, to get multiple perspectives, and it also takes a lot of input. And so I'm just putting up this slide to remind folks that there was some specific outreach to Black, Indigenous, and people of color at specific schools that might be heavily impacted by this process. So that in the last couple of weeks, that's been Lent and Harrison Park. And there were some questions about defining success for your child and how your school plays a part in that. And here's some of the responses that we heard. And is that visible enough that you want to take a minute to read it? Instead of hearing my voice, sometimes it depends on the device you're on.
Yeah, you keep breaking up and so I'm reading.
I'm breaking up? Okay.
And I can hear you well, Judy.
Okay. Let me see if I can close other things to try and improve my bandwidth. Always need to improve my bandwidth. Thanks, Lisa. And then there were some very specific questions about the placement of DLI programs, because that's become a critical part of this process. And here is some feedback that was received on that, very specific questions. So on that program placement, this is a list of the elements that have been, that have received consensus from the SEGC so far. Clark is going to be the new location for Harrison Park K-5 students. And the Chinese dual language immersion program that serves those neighborhood students now will remain there. Because Harrison Park is moving into Clark, the program that's currently at Clark, which is creative science, is going to move over to Bridger and join with the neighborhood program, which is really small. And together they're going to share that building and all have the same program. It'll be all the same program as what creative science teachers deliver. The other area of consensus is that the other Chinese DLI program, which is currently at Woodstock, would remain, and it would still be co-located with the neighborhood, which is what the Chinese immersion families, including native Chinese speakers, most asked for. And that where we have dual language immersion programs with more than one in more than one location, like Chinese and then like Spanish, which is at 3 locations, we would bring them together so that all the kids in that DLI program would be at the same middle school. So there's consensus around doing that in theory, but the practical, like doing it in practice, has actually been one of the most challenging parts of this process. Last week, there have been a series of discussions and some polls done during meetings over the last, since the start of the year on these key issues. A majority of SEGC members agreed to move forward with considering these program placements at last week's meeting. Elementary school Spanish immersion would remain at Atkinson and Lent. And the Bridger program, which is 2 strands of Spanish immersion, would move to Lent. Lent would become a whole school DLI program. Lent neighborhood students would have guaranteed access to it, but Lent neighborhood students who either would choose not to have Spanish immersion or would be coming in, moving in, and be too high a grade to enter at the beginning level, those students would opt out to another school, probably to Marysville. The middle school would remain, for Spanish immersion, would remain Kellogg, and the strand of Spanish immersion that's currently at Mount Tabor would move to Kellogg. And then the middle school Chinese would consolidate at Harrison Park Middle School, and that would include the 2 strands of Chinese immersion that are currently at Hosford. So that was a basis of a plan that we are building other things around there. As I said, there have been multiple times for people to weigh in on these plans, and there have been, different outcomes. So I just want to say, like we are legitimately interested in your full thoughts around these placements. PPS has, so I'm a PPS representative. I'll tell you, we have not made up our minds on which of these, on this set of program placements or on any other. We sincerely want to hear why people support this or something else, and what it would take for you to support this plan if you're concerned about it. So that's one of the most important outcomes of what we're trying to achieve this week. This says a little bit more about the Lent as a whole school Spanish immersion. And so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I wonder, I would like to just ask, especially Lisa, Dominique, anyone else who wasn't at the meeting last week or wasn't in the session that we did yesterday. Like, do you have any thoughts or questions about Lent as a whole school DLI that you'd like us to talk about now? Anything coming up for you yet?
Hey, Judy, there's just a quick question from Adriel in the chat, just asking how overcrowded Kellogg would be.
Yeah, I was gonna just type into the chat real quick, but I can say it out loud. It's around 700 estimated enrollment for the forecasted 2025 school year, which is just a little bit below 90% of its capacity. And that's specifically for F1 and F3, which have Kellogg at its highest estimated enrollment. It's lower in F2.
And by comparison, Harrison Park Middle School would be around 590 students. Is that right, Jed?
Yeah, actually, we got a slide that will help
Okay.
spell this out specifically. Yeah.
Okay. But in terms of thinking through the program context, there is a differential in size with this plan.
Okay, and I have a question. So if Lent was the DLI campus, then does that mean that there will not be Chinese immersion at Harrison Park and Spanish at Kellogg?
Oh no, there would be. This is just the K-5 Spanish immersion. I'll move forward, and I've got a slide here for this is all about the Spanish immersion thing at Kellogg, and then specifically for Harrison Park. Middle school Chinese immersion would consolidate and be at Harrison Park. It'd be at Clark for K-5. It would be at Woodstock for K-5, and then both those programs would come together at Harrison Park for grades 6 through 8. Chinese immersion families at Harrison Park are strongly in favor of it. We also noted that there's a lot, I mean, for some kids that are in the Hosford program, this is going to be a further school. So transportation, how that would work is an important consideration and condition for success. There's also a concern that Harrison Park might lose its Title I funding because the demographics of the school would change with Chinese immersion students from the Woodstock program coming there. And some SUGC representatives have stated a preference for moving the Chinese immersion altogether to Kellogg. So it would leave Harrison Park and go to Kellogg and have all of Spanish immersion come to Harrison Park. Is that helpful, Dominique?
Yeah, I hear that. But what did you say about Lentz being the DLI campus? Was that for middle school?
No, it's for elementary school.
Okay, now I get it. All right, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, anything else about the Lent program that people want us to focus on? And again, this is your space. So any questions you ask or any ideas you have are really welcome. We're anxious to assist.
I'm just here observing for just a few of my parents that they're not too happy with what's going on with the Lent. I don't know, so I'm just here observing and taking notes and stuff for them. But how do they have access to this? Because they were never told about none of this. And so they're just wondering, why don't they have say in anything? And no one in the school has really let them know besides me. And so do they have access to all of this stuff? Where can I let them in on some of this stuff? And I don't know if you've made up your minds or not yet, but they just, they just kind of felt left out. And as even though it doesn't affect them, it really does affect them because the kids go to school there. So I'm just wondering, how can they get in on some of this stuff? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm just here for, just to listen and take notes and get what I get out of it. So.
And Lisa, do you have any messages from the community of what you've heard them say?
It isn't with the big community though. I just work with natives. So this is just with natives, but at the same time, it's still with their school. So it's just, you know what I mean? I let them know and they just want to look at all this material stuff. And then I can come to you tomorrow, maybe in the meeting with what, I can come up with. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Lisa, we would really appreciate and love any support that you can give to help. And if there's anything that we can do, if to just help you convey this, because it's in websites and it's in different places, but if it's not really where people are finding it right now, then we need to do more. And we don't want to disrupt important relationships that you have, but if it's a good place for you, we authentically, deeply want to hear and know what the impact of these changes might be on people.
So I don't know what I kind of got out of it, because I'm kind of new to all of this as well, and I let everyone know that in the beginning of the some of the meetings that I made. This went way a long time ago. I've only been here for maybe 3 months, if that. But what I get out of it is they feel like as Native Americans in their community is that they don't have one because of stuff like this. It comes and takes place, and then they have to go all over the place because stuff is constantly getting broken up. So that's kind of what I get out of the 3 parents that are at this school, and they're they had moved 2 times in 6 years and to try to fit in with the communities. And so they just want to know why they're not being addressed or what, because it's not just certain people, it's the whole school. And that's what I get out of it. But so I'm here just to take notes and observe, and then when I get all of this stuff, I want to go bring it to their attention And then, you know, whether, you know, how they take it, they'll take it, and hopefully they'll take it okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think that you're right, that that's a perspective and voice that maybe hasn't been heard yet. And we would like to work with you to make sure that that is something that we share more broadly, if that's okay.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I'm just sending a message from what I got just in the fact, you know, like 3 days ago. And I was like, oh yeah, I actually do sit there and, you know, and they're like, well, why haven't we been told about this? And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I don't work in the school, so I don't really have the answer for that. I said, but I can update you on what is going, you know, going on. And so that's pretty much, you know, what I got out of all that. So I'm here for the community advocating. So that's what I'm trying to do as well.
Thank you very much. Sandra, I see you have your hand up and I see that there's a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know which came first.
Adriel's was first, then it was probably a tie with Sandra and Dominique.
Okay. Sandra, I'm going to go ahead and see if we can address the questions that are in the chat. So Adriel asked about shifting Res J, meaning racial equity, social justice, culturally responsive partners. So those are partnerships, resources that PPS engages with for community partners. And will they be following the shifting communities? I think that's a great question that I don't have a full answer for, and one that we'll try and get more information about. As we look at, for example, a portion of the Lent community, like how it might shift and where the supports would be for students. Like, would there be more supports if at Marysville? And Lisa, I hear what you're saying about families feeling like they're trying really hard to fit in and make community, and things just keep getting shifted on them. And then Dominique's question is about Title I. So that is a federal funding that comes to schools that have a certain, it's the measure of students who qualify for free meals in a school, and if it's above a certain level, like 33%, then that school receives additional resources that they can use for targeted support and additional staff. And right now, Harrison Park K-8 qualifies for Title I support. And the forecast, so when Flow Analytics, who's here and develops the plans, when they develop the plans, we can also add into it and estimate if all the same kids that are here now went to the schools following this new plan and these new lines, what would the rate of low-income students be, and would they still qualify for Title I? And while the K-5, the elementary Clark would, if we made all these changes, it could be maybe that the middle school wouldn't. Now, we can't say that for sure because the kids that are here now won't be the ones when that school opens, and other things might change. So the rate might change. For example, if the rate is lowered, then more schools would fit in it. Is that helpful, Dominique? And feel free to respond verbally if it's easier.
Okay, that is helpful as far as understanding what Title I is. But if we know that right now the families that Harrison Park supports, they qualify for Title I, and then if Hosford comes in that does not currently have Title I, that would take away those services for those families. I don't see how that's helping that community. You know, it's actually not helping that community at all, you know, and so I feel like we would have to problem solve that. And then my next question was regarding Harrison Park, like what are the plans? We know it's going to be a middle school, so what are the plans to prepare that school to be an all middle school, you know, as far as staffing goes, as far as the classes are, because the middle school right now, from my understanding, there's not enough staff, and I feel like that's hurting our students and the curriculum, in addition to COVID and all the other challenges we have. But I feel like that's, how are we going to staff the school?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things. First of all, the concern that you raise about Title I and whether that would, that might not serve the students is one that other SEGC members have raised. And so there's other folks in the room who may want to just have some dialogue with you about that. Some have said, well, but that would be offset by higher enrollment. So with higher enrollment, you actually get more resources, and then you may not need the same amount of resources that have been coming in for Title I. Others could might want to, like I said, I would invite some dialogue about that. But if I could just quickly on the question of preparation for the middle school. So the middle school won't start as a full middle school for another year and a half, right? It's fall of 2023. And so there's a lot that's being done now to start preparing the facility, planning, specific spaces that are middle school oriented. And I know that the principal, the middle school redesign director, and others are really working on how its programming will be robust. And the principal is probably the best voice on that. I don't think she's on the call today, but she could share more about that. And is there anyone who wants to go ahead and address this question about Title I and Harrison Park, or share any more? Dominique, it's really great to have you here, and appreciate the questions and perspectives.
Thank you. And we may not need it at this moment, but it might be a good idea in regards to what Lisa was talking about, is just far as representing the community and being able to translate, like to say, okay, so for me, the way I see Title I is like, it's really helping our kids. I don't know if it has something to do with Sun School or like the after school meals and after school programs. But what I heard you just say was that if they lose Title I, they still will be getting more resources. So what does that mean, and in what way? So that way, if you had it like side by side, so that way, while we're having this dialogue, we can say, okay, well, it actually would benefit if we lost Title I in the long run, and like this is what we would have to do to prepare for that change. Because at this time, it just sounds like if a student can't afford their lunch right now, in the next 2 years or next year, I don't know if they'll be able to afford it then either. So it's just like, I don't know what the mindset is behind that. But right now here, without knowing what the benefits are of losing Title I, to me, it just sounds like a bad idea.
And keep in mind, like that side-by-side comparison gets so complicated by all these other funding factors, right? That these, like, we're estimating enrollment for a future that isn't here now. We're not estimating how funding and thresholds might be different in the future. So that's what's challenging there. Sandra, are you there? And did you have a comment, question that you wanted to share?
Yep, I'm here. That's why I have my hand up.
Great.
Not for fun. Anyhow, I have 3 questions. My first question, I'll rearrange the order. It has to do with Title I, since we're discussing that right now. And because there is a lot of concern around that. And being a rep for a school that went through the process of losing Title I in the last 5 years, I understand that that's a difficult transition. My question in there is, to what extent are we able to put caveats in place as an SEGC when making our recommendations to help ease with the Title I transition? Like, for instance, like additional equity, FTE, just in talking with community members and some other SEGC reps, I wonder if maybe now a kind of an, I guess, an opposite perspective, if now might not be a better time to rip off the Title I Band-Aid, if that's going to happen, because these schools have the district's ears at the moment, and we may be able to put additional supports or caveats in place when making our recommendations. So is that a possibility? That's my first question.
So to that specifically, yes, I mean, you are absolutely invited to raise and share the conditions for success. Any caveats that you think are that would be important and helpful?
Well, I'm more asking if those are available to us.
Are you asking if you can add them to your recommendation?
I'm asking if we add them to the recommendation, like, is that something that exists that would make sense for us to add to the recommendation? Like, we could recommend that we all get plastic surgery makeovers, but it's not realistic. So I guess I'm asking if that's a realistic thing to add to our recommendation.
I think that it is realistic, and I think that if you go back to phase 1, there were a number of like conditions and caveats that people put in the recommendation that we did our best to honor. And
Okay.
and so for you to include it, sorry, I'm hearing an echo, is will help ensure that it becomes part of what Claire Hertz moves forward to the board. That's the best way to achieve it.
My second question is simple one, is surrounding the February 7th through 15th community outreach that PPS has posted that's taking place. Where can we get more information about that, and how do we know which communities are being reached out to? That was a community question that we had last night.
I'm going to speak to that one. I think there was a typo with our comms department. They heard work sessions, and I think they were thinking that that was that was engagement because they have our presentations. So that's something I need to check with our comms department on. So I think that's just a misspoken on our site.
Okay, that's what we did tonight.
There is additional, like there may be additional targeted outreach. There may be additional families who get phone calls. There may be additional things that are happening between now and the time. And there, we don't have a schedule. We don't have a list. It's partly because we're trying to hear where your priorities are across SEGC through the evaluation that we're asking you to do.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's just there was confusion surrounding that because people saw that up on the board. And then the last question is just surrounding the demographics of the outreach that was done at Lent and other schools that was presented to the group last week. I'm just wondering where I might be able to do a deeper dive on the who responded. So specifically, we're getting questions regarding what the native speaker DLI community feels is best for their community. So there were questions from our school community as to whether or not we could see how many of the respondents, like what their background is.
So I believe that Shanice Clark has prepared a summary that will be that's going to get to you all as quickly as possible, and we'll check to see if that kind of demographic breakdown is it sounds like you're asking for a specific demographic breakdown.
Right. Yeah, that's what they're asking for.
Of the phone calls and other outreach that's happened, the targeted outreach in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, specifically what led to the information that was shared last week.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thank you. That's it for me.
Thanks, Sandra. Okay. I wanted to make sure that you all had a chance to review this program placement context document that tries to encapsulate through the the conversations that have happened throughout the month of January, the difference between 2 different program placements, what's been stated as advantages and disadvantages, who benefits and who is burdened. This is a working document and folks are welcome to add to it, and then some questions. And then also to say that there is a question on the SEGC evaluation tool specifically about program placement and whether you are in support of the plan that we've been talking about. If not, what alternatives you would want to see. So we'd encourage you to complete that. It's due by Thursday night, and it's a very important tool because it'll help shape how we approach the final meeting on Thursday, the 17th. Lisa, please go ahead.
So I was reading in the comment, yeah, at Megan, I understand. No, I understand. We follow the students everywhere because yeah, we do. That's not what I was stating. What they're stating is that they're tired of moving, period. So they're in their area and they're just tired of moving all the time. That's what they're I can follow the students all over the place, but for a great example, you know, one of my students has a favorite teacher, so they just have to leave that whole teacher and their whole unit that they've been working with. That's what they're saying. So I just wanted to make that clear. Yes, I know I could, you know, do all of that, but I just wanted to make sure I got, you know, what they're saying out there.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And that was actually in relation to Adriel's question, was asking if the ResJ partners would be moving with schools or whatever. So it was just more of a clarification on partners. So I was just saying yes, and so some stay in the community, but Naya, you guys are very different because you actually do move with the students. But thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. We move with our students everywhere. If they're in their place, we can go with them. But yes. But thank you. I was just like, no, that's not what I was trying to say. So I had to make that clear. But no, it's just that they're just tired of the communities getting broken up. And so that's all they're concerned. So I just want to make sure I get their statements out there and what they want to say and make sure I get the right info back to them. So
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so now we wanted to shift and take a deep dive into some different ways of approaching boundary changes that are built on top of the program placements that we just talked about. If the program placements were different, you might still like some of these boundary changes, but some others might not be as effective. So that's just the how those things go together. This is the F series, and I think what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Jed. And similarly, I just really appreciate that this has been informal and that you've, you know, asked the questions that you feel are most, that you most need to have answered as we're moving through. We have about 45 more minutes. Hopefully we'll cover all the bases and get through your questions. Appreciate those of you who are here. So Jed, do you want me to unshare?
No, you can go ahead and just keep sharing. We'll just go
Okay.
through the first few slides here and then I'll take over.
Great.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for showing up this afternoon. I wanted to provide some initial context and then just some time to look at some of the boundary changes that are being proposed to go alongside the program placements that are most recently being discussed by the Guiding Coalition. And these are being built off from what was shown in draft proposal E1 from a program placement standpoint. This was talked about with the big group, the big Guiding Coalition group on January 20th. And you can see the graphical version here of what those program placements look like. Just want to highlight that, you know, visually here, the same things that we've heard Judy kind of walk through on previous slides, that creative science is a K-8 at the Bridger campus. Harrison Park is the middle school location for Chinese DLI. So having Chinese DLI from Clark and Woodstock feeding to Harrison Park. Kellogg being the middle school location for Spanish DLI, so the existing Atkinson program and the consolidated Bridger and Lent programs out of the Lent building, feeding to Kellogg. And then you see there's also some neighborhood program changes as well here, with Atkinson feeding to Atkinson feeding to Harrison Park, as well as Vestal feeding to Harrison Park as a change from Roseway Heights. So that's the programmatic background here. And we've talked about a lot throughout this process, some enrollment targets that we're trying to hit. And one of the main levers that we have to help us hit certain enrollment is to change the attendance areas.
Sorry.
All good? Is to make changes to the attendance areas and therefore the group of the pool of students that would be available to the different neighborhood programs or would be assigned to the different neighborhood programs, right? So now that we've got at least some of these program placements nailed down to a certain extent, I wouldn't say they're nailed down, but we've got a working framework. We've been able to build boundaries around that. And so we've done that in 3 different ways here. And we've upped the letter to F from E. And we've got three different versions here. And the only difference between these 3 scenarios, I'll call them, are the middle school boundaries. The elementary school boundaries are the same throughout here. And I'll just start with the boundary description of F1. The significant difference between it and the others is that it splits the Lewis neighborhood between Lane and Selwood middle schools, specifically at 45th Avenue, kind of a north-south divider through that proposed attendance area. The enrollment modeling for that estimates that Lane would be at about 520 students in the 2025 school year, and Selwood would be at 470 in that 2025 projected year. Now, this is for Selwood still below that 500 enrollment target that we'd like to get to for middle schools, but it is much improved over what was the initial estimate and boundary for Selwood in E1, the original version of these. Draft proposal F2 similarly has a split elementary school between middle schools. In this case, it's Arleta between Lane and Kellogg. And specifically there, it's at Foster Road. There are about 110 students that are assigned to Kellogg south of Foster right now, and that would reassign them to Lane, putting Lane's estimated enrollment at about 570 students and Kellogg's estimated enrollment at 580. Because of that shift in enrollment, it allows us to keep Lewis in the Selwood feeder pattern, and Selwood enrollment is then estimated to be above that 500 mark at 530. Now, draft proposal F3, this actually does not involve a split of an elementary school between middle schools, at least for any neighborhood program. What we do see here is that Woodstock is changing its feeder pattern to feed to Lane Middle School instead of Hosford, which is where it's currently feeding. And we'll also, similar to what we've seen in F2, we're able to keep Lewis as a feeder to Selwood. So this scenario puts Lane enrollment up around 600. Selwood, again, same boundary as with F2, so 530 students estimated there. However, we see with Woodstock moving out of the Hosford feeder pattern that does drop Hosford a bit below that 500 target at 480. I also wanted to point out that for both F1 and F3, I haven't called out specifically on this slide, but Kellogg's enrollment is much higher than the other middle schools at about 700 enrollment. And so that was something that we were looking to try and alleviate. And F2 was the option that we looked at to help create better parity amongst the middle schools as far as that enrollment went. So next slide, please. So I wanted to just take folks through how this plays out from our racial equity impact standpoint. So we've been continuing to look at how these different scenarios affect the entire student population, Black and Native students, and English language learners. And so this is a graphic that we put together for many of the draft proposals to date here. And I just wanted to give some context around this if you hadn't looked at it recently, or this is the first time you're seeing these. We will see all three of these against each other, but just to kind of frame up what you're seeing, we've got 5 indicators here along the left in different colors here. And you see the text that explains those. The first is that target of 500 students at our middle schools. The second is having 270 students at our elementary schools. The third is making sure that we don't have schools that are overloaded, which is defined as above 80% of the capacity of that school having students assigned. And then we also have a measure here of the percentage of students that are within 1 mile of the school that they are assigned to. And finally, affected students, which is the number of students that are assigned to a different school building than they are today. So with that said, I just want to point out how these 3 scenarios are different from one another with these measures. So with the F1 here, I think the big difference that we see is that very first percentage of 61.4%. We see that that's quite a bit lower than the current baseline, which I'm sorry I didn't point out, but the skinnier, lighter colored bars below each of those indicators is where we're at today. And so we see that that's a pretty low number relative to the baseline, but also to the other scenarios. And that's because Selwood is accounting for most of that because it's below 500 enrollment for that first indicator. So that affects that. Just also want to point out that the purple indicator, that is an inversely related indicator to the yellow and blue ones above with enrollment. We want to see a lower percentage, essentially, fewer students in overcrowded schools. And you can see that that is successful pretty much across the board here relative to the baseline. So I think it's helpful to see these in context against each other. So if we can go to F2, the next one here.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, so we see here that that first top left indicator that was formerly 61%, it's now 73% for all students. So that's a big jump there. And we're just seeing across the board for Black and Native students, ELL students as well, that's a high percentage relative to other proposals that we looked at. I also want to point out that elementary school is an improvement from the baseline across the board. That's based on largely the attendance area boundary changes that try and get those schools up to 270. So just the highlight here with F2 is it's the most balanced from a middle school standpoint and has the most schools above 500 enrollment. Next slide, please. And so we see this take a little bit of a drop, that top indicator there, and that is primarily because Hosford is falling below 500 enrollment in this scenario here. So it drags that percentage down. You see it also has an impact on Black and Native students and ELL students relative to the other scenarios, because there is a significant percentage of students at Hosford that fall in those categories. So those are the big differences here. It's really around the middle school enrollment piece. We're seeing very similar percentages for elementary schools that are above 270, similar percentages for students within a mile of their school, and very similar numbers for the number of affected students. Okay, next slide here.
Hey, Jed, as I'm changing it, Adriel just asked an important question about Black and Native, and actually Native is Native American. And maybe we need to get that label more descriptive and more accurate, especially as we spend a fair amount of time talking about Native speakers. And so that's a change that we could get made, right?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Thank you. If I can move a slide forward. Okay. And let's just pause to say any questions or other input about these the indicators and the differences so far. I think what's next is sort of taking a deep dive at the street level, showing some maps and explaining what some different areas of change are. But let's just pause.
How are people feeling generally about the elementary school enrollment numbers here? I mean, I appreciate that on the indicators we're up, but I mean, we're very close to the line on several, and you know, definitely locking in some very small enrollments at some of the K-5 schools. I mean, I'm curious what other coalition members make of that, or how we should be weighing that. It's just something that struck me when I was looking through the spreadsheet.
It definitely generated some discussion yesterday and concerns that there are too many schools that are too close or right at that cusp of a number that we've said is pretty minimal. I don't know if there's other thoughts on that today.
Or I guess my other question would be like, do we even have, I guess the answer is we don't really have any options to meaningfully move that, but yeah, I mostly just wanted to throw it out to the group.
To summarize what we heard yesterday, and I think I'm sorry with sharing my screen. Others who were there or have opinions about this, please chime in. But people raised that, you know, the limitation of not being able to look at schools a little bit further west that have more robust enrollment, and you know how some shifts from further west east might have improved the situation. And then there was a question of whether we should be sincerely considering consolidation. And so that's some of the points from yesterday.
I mean, I guess here, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but it seemed like there was a good enough pause. Just restate our concerns with F2. All of these proposals make substantial boundary changes to the Arleta boundary. We have approximately, I think it's 64 kids shifted out to 4 different schools. We get 45 approximately kids from Marysville, a large swath that's added, and then turned into a split feeder middle school, and we're under enrolled. So it's kind of a lot of things stacked on each other right there. So I know I've stated that in a large group, but I'm just going to restate that although S2 looks good on paper, or the closest on paper to what we've said we're trying to reach, that is a substantial amount of change being requested of the Arleta neighborhood, and the community is not really on board with that, frankly. We would rather see Marysville and Arleta's boundaries changed more substantially than to have the split feeder pattern plus a substantial boundary change plus under enrollment all at the same time.
Thank you. And I think actually, you know, if we move forward, we're going to take a look at some of those boundary pieces, and that might spur additional conversation or. Okay.
I'm just disappointed that this came to be even.
So, yeah, I mentioned that E1 from January 20th was the starting place for these from a boundary standpoint as well. And we got some specific feedback from coalition members about some of the K-5 boundary changes, either you know, concerns from members themselves or relaying information from their communities. And we made some changes based on that that really were in line with, you know, continuing to be able to, you know, try and maximize that number of schools that were above the 270 mark. One of those, the first one here is an area of Marysville that was proposed to be assigned over to Lent. So it's basically the attendance area that is east of 82nd. Yeah, you can, yeah, please feel free to flip back and forth here. It's helpful. Yeah, the area that you see on the left there between Holgate and Foster. So in the F series, that is assigned back to Marysville. Let's go back. We'll just flip back and forth between these two slides. If we can.
Sorry, I was trying to find the little, like the thing that you used yesterday to make it, to highlight.
No, the drawing thing.
Yeah.
You know, I can take over sharing, and I can
I
probably.
think that's a great idea. All right, we're gonna, I'm so done sharing well. Ted's gonna be the pilot so that he can flip between the maps.
Let's do that.
Ted.
Okay. And it may or may, oh yeah, it will. Cool. All right, so the second area here that I wanted to highlight is there's an area proposed to be moved from the Atkinson attendance area to Creston. This was, I'll show it on the map here, but area between 52nd and 56 and Powell and Woodward. So that is this area here. And let me just grab my little spotlighter here. And this is Powell, this is 52nd. So assigning that area back to Atkinson. That was initially to help with enrollment for Creston. So we had to find other ways to help that area out. The next area, and I'll just flip back here, was an area moving from Lewis to Woodstock. Most of that area is back at Lewis, but the area north of Carlton is continuing to be proposed to be assigned to Woodstock. So that's this area here is assigned back to Lewis, and this area here remains proposed to Woodstock. And then finally, an area that was formerly proposed from Lewis to Whitman is actually back on the table. It was expanded from what you see in E1 north to Duke. So this area right here, I believe we've seen that in D series, that area was proposed to Whitman and is now reflected that way in the F series. And so I also wanted to highlight some changes that moving those pieces back, we needed to look for other ways to, again, try and achieve that highest enrollment possible for the most elementary schools. And I want to highlight first Arleta here. I want to show you both what's proposed to move out and what's proposed to move in. So again, I mentioned Creston needing some attendance. So or additional enrollment. So this area here is proposed to move from Arleta to Creston, with an area in the southeast of Woodstock moving out and into the Woodmere Whitman schools. We wanted to be able to bolster that school a bit, keep its enrollment near where it's at right now for its neighborhood program. So this is part of that plan to do that. We see also down here, Arleta losing a bit of area to Woodmere in this case, again, to help with those schools that are already pretty low enrolled. And then just based on some of the proposed ways of getting Kellogg actually within its boundary, this area here being assigned to Marysville to kind of clean up an area here that would kind of swing around Arleta to get up to this area, which I think we've gotten some feedback about different ways to look at that. But the big piece here is moving this area south of Foster between 82nd and Woodstock and 72nd, assigning that to Arleta to help offset some of these areas that are moving out. And a big part of that also is that, and what makes this possible from Marysville's standpoint is that there's this area here that is being added into the Marysville attendance area, again, to ensure that Kellogg is actually within its boundary. We had some discussion yesterday about what that boundary might look like if perhaps this area here that I'm highlighting was assigned to Arleta instead of Marysville to create a bit more of a north-south contiguous boundary there. So I think that's something that we'll be looking at. We're expecting to see come through in the evaluation comments. Just a couple more to highlight here. This area here of it's currently assigned to Bridger, but being assigned over to Atkinson and these F series here. This is to create a contiguous boundary with the other schools that are feeding to Harrison Park. So a little bit awkward here, just given where the location of Kellogg is and the need to get enrollment into Harrison Park. So kind of creating this long area here to touch the proposed Clark boundary. So that does add some enrollment into Atkinson to get its neighborhood program at about 270 students projected. And then just wanted to highlight these areas here in the Whitman, proposed Whitman area. So these would be additions to Whitman's attendance area to help with its very low projected enrollment right now. With its current boundary, it's projected to be at only 190 enrollment in 2025. So this area we've talked about a little bit here, being reassigned from Lewis over to Whitman. So this is 52nd Avenue right here. And then this area here being assigned from Woodmere into Whitman. And this is kind of some enrollment by way of Woodstock, because Woodmere is receiving an area that's just kind of right here where I'm highlighting from Woodstock to help with its enrollment. So it's kind of a cascading effect there to help bolster both Woodmere and Whitman's enrollment. And so at this point, I'm going to pause again and to see if there's any specific things that we can pull up. I've got the maps available, summary statistics, all kinds of things that we can look at if folks have interest.
So I see, Andy, you've got a question about the single strand neighborhood programs. Okay, so here's where I want to say, whether a school is staffed for 1 or 2 strands depends on more than just its overall enrollment number, or even it's just like base enrollment by grade. There's a bunch of other factors that are rolled into it. PPS does something that we call section-based staffing. So even if the overall number is lower than the target, they may still qualify for 2 sections. Having said that, I don't know of any other than the DLI programs that we're working to avoid. I think that there are some schools that are looking at possible budget staffing cuts for next year, but I haven't seen staffing. It actually hasn't come out for next year. So you have to put together both the numbers and the staffing components to get to that. And we don't have an estimate right now of what that would be.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I mean, I feel like this is kind of in the spirit of the questions I was asking in the last meeting, even about Harrison Park, which is, I don't even necessarily know what I don't know on some of this, but it's like, are those schools going to really be okay at that? At that, what seems like a pretty small enrollment. So, I mean, I obviously trust the district's perspective on that, but I hope that I just hope that as a coalition, we're, getting some assurances on that, or that we have some idea about, to the discussion earlier, like, what do we need to recommend or raise up in a recommendation about supports that would be needed to make sure that those schools are going to be pretty small, are offering the same sort of experiences as schools with larger enrollment.
Yeah, so through section-based staffing, we do try and consider and provide additional support to schools that are either just on the cusp or have like extraordinary factors, like being co-located, right, with the DLI program. Supporting special education focused classrooms, as does our LEADA, right? Because we need classrooms so that kids who are in those special ed classrooms for most of the day, like the objective is to help them also, like to have them be a part of the mainstream classroom as much as possible. And that's really not feasible when you only have a single strand. So that's a consideration. Their status, their improvement status with the state is a consideration. And all of those factors, like it's a complicated formula. We don't expect you all to become experts at it. I'm not an expert at it. Most of the staff on this process wouldn't be considered experts at it, but they're all factors. So 270 is not a number that's you are guaranteed to get certain things and you are guaranteed to not get certain things. It's just, the closer you are to 270 or above, the better chance that it's your general fund formula that will provide you at least 2 sections per grade level. Wishy-washy, I know.
No, it's helpful. It's helpful. I mean, and you get the spirit of this, right? It's like, we just want to know that we're signing up for something that is giving kids the best shot to get the education they need, regardless of where they go to school. That's the whole spirit of the process. So, I mean, I appreciate the context.
Appreciate the question. Thanks.
You're muted.
I'm noticing that we are getting close to time, and so why don't, like, for the good of the group, are there other specific topics that you want to make sure we spend time on? Is there any other boundary change, street names, areas that we haven't talked about that you're curious about, that you would like us to attend to before we close for the day?
I have one, but I just talked, so I'll wait to see if there's others.
Well, let's hear you.
Hey, Judy.
Go ahead, Sheila.
Sorry, this is Sheila talking. I know we may not be able to answer it in this session, but one of the things that came up at our community listening sessions last night was this question for rising 5th graders. If they go into a specific school for 6th grade, will they be able to be grandfathered into that school and remain there for their full 3 years? Or would they then, either if they're in neighborhood or in immersion, would they then kind of follow, follow the change? Because, for Atkinson, both neighborhood and DLI are predicted to be shifting those middle school locations. So just wanted to raise that again, that's been a big question in our community.
Yeah,
It looks like Judy may have froze potentially.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
was thinking too. Like, did I freeze?
I thought I froze too and was checking my internet.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just checking. It's going to speak.
Yeah,
Same
I'm
here.
I'm like pacing around on the school playground stealing Wi-Fi, so I was like, oh, maybe I just lost my connection.
Sounds like it, Andy. I want to, maybe I can just share my screen real quick here. And I realized that we didn't really show any specific maps like we did with the last group yesterday. So I just want to be as consistent as we can for folks here. This that I'm pulling up right here really just shows the essence of the differences between F1, 2, and 3 here. And just to reorient folks with, this is the overview map here. So it's showing changes for both the elementary and middle school level. The fill, the dark color that's filling these areas, that's the proposed middle school attendance area. The yellow outline is the proposed elementary school boundary. And then we've got cross-hatching to show areas of change. And middle school and elementary school change go in different directions. So if you look at Creston here, and again, I can get my spotlight up. Creston here, this is a middle school change being assigned from Kellogg to Hosford. So you see that cross-hatching going in that direction. And let's see if I can find, here's an example of elementary school change, that area that we talked about with Marysville assigned to Arleta, that's going in that direction. And then where you see kind of the chain link pattern here, that's both elementary and middle school changes proposed here. So with that set, I can kind of flip through. Here's F2, here's F3, back to F1 here, where you can see those middle school attendance areas changing. So those.
Jed, you said that in F1 and F3, Kellogg is at slightly over 90%, so like 92%.
Yeah, it's right around that 90% utilization.
And that's the highest that we see.
Is it the highest that we've seen? It's close.
I think that's what you said, is that 92 is the highest of the three proposals right now, to clarify.
It's certainly the highest of the middle schools in Southeast. Yes. Yeah. You're back, Judy. I don't know if you were in mid-thought here, but I just wanted to give folks an opportunity to see the maps that we showed to the last group.
Great. Yeah, sorry about that. And Sheila, I followed up with in the chat there. Sorry. Yeah, other questions and ideas?
Sorry, Judy, thanks so much for answering the question. And just to clarify that we had that question both for immersion students as well as neighborhood students. So a lot of our neighborhood families who would start their year at Mount Tabor are wanting an answer. Would they be able to stay there for the full 3 years, or would they follow their program when Atkinson shifts to a different location?
Yeah, and the answer will come from the board because, but at this point, like staff's recommendation, I believe, is to follow the standard practice. Like we do have a policy in place, and we'd have to recommend altering the policy. And SEGC's voice matters. So if you all think that the best thing to do is allow kids to stay, to follow the current policy, then please address that. There's actually a question in the evaluation that tries to get at that. So please, it'd be good to know if there's consensus around that, or just what the range of opinions are on that, whether follow the current practice and let kids who are in a school remain to the highest grade, or accelerate it so that you get the change faster and schools get larger or smaller quicker. but that is a boundary change. And the decision for program placement is generally all at once. That the whole program moves at once. And it's that distinction between the two that complicates it, but it's very present because we've got a lot of kids in programs and affected by neighborhood change, boundary change in these plans. So lots to think about. Again, and it's been this way for months, and appreciate your, your resilience and your continued curiosity and the ideas and opinions that you're sharing, the feedback that you're hearing and that you're passing on to us. But what we really hope that you will do as well is complete the evaluation tool. The evaluation tool is our best chance of knowing the range of ideas and opinions of why people are interested in certain solutions and why they are concerned about other ideas. So Megan just put it in the chat again. It's due 9 o'clock tomorrow night. We have a session tomorrow evening that will basically be a repeat of this session. It's optional. You don't have to attend. You're welcome to attend. It's a chance to hear other people's ideas and to discuss them. So it'll be informal like this. And hopefully even more SEGC voices. And then if we finish early, you'll just have extra time to finish up your evaluation tool. And then our goal is to provide that back to SEGC on Monday so that you can see that we won't have names attached, but you can see all of the individual results to all of the questions that are on the evaluation. It's also something that we're sharing with your volunteer writing team, and a couple of folks from that team are here, Dee, Andy, Adriel. And so, they've volunteered to help put together the recommendation. And a lot, your input, your ideas, your voice will be a big part of that. Anything else, writing team, you think would be helpful or you'd like from your colleagues that are here in the room?
No, I mean, just to be clear, I think our job is to write up what there is consensus on. It's not at all, it's not our own judgment or anything. So yeah, I think the challenge is going to be how we synthesize everything we get on the evaluation tool. We have one more official meeting, is that right?
Yes, next Thursday. 8 days and a few hours as a formal SEGC, as far as we know right now. So this is definitely the last sprint.
Well, thank you guys for your time. Megan, Judy, and why can't I think of your name? What is it?
Ethan? It's gotta be.
Yes, Jed, sorry. Thank you. I mean, you guys are doing a lot of relay running on this, so thank you.
Yeah, Ethan and Jennifer from Flow are here as well, and that's so that they can hear all your ideas. They know, and they're going to do our best to help you have any last thoughts, any last things that need to be modified. They're listening really closely so that they can execute any final changes. We're not, so that's what we're here for. Yeah, it's really good to see you. Thank you again, Lisa. And please let us know how we can help in any way, support any of the families that you're working with at any of the schools.
Yes,
Sandra,
no
appreciate
problem.
Yeah.
I'll get everything I need to get to them. I actually see them in the morning, so yes, I'll bring what I can back tomorrow to the meeting. So thank you all for your hard work, everyone.
Thanks, Lisa. And thank you. It's nice to see